Nominee directors, guys, you've probably heard of a term. Maybe someone told you you need one to keep your name off the paperwork. Maybe you think it adds privacy or protection, but here's the truth, guys, okay? Nominee directors are the most misunderstood term as such in offshore structuring. If used correctly, they can add real substance. If used incorrectly, they can get you into serious trouble. I'm Will Hodgson. I'm a co-founder of HPT Group. We help entrepreneurs, business owners, high net worth individuals structure, relocate, and set up their lives internationally in a very custom and tailored solution unique to every single client that comes to us. You can become a client below by clicking the link, okay, and apply. Simply have a chat for free. I don't charge for consultations until we engage in any work, okay, guys? Maybe we can't even work with you, for example, which happens quite a lot, but it's also worth finding out, right? And we're happy to always give our own opinion anyways, okay? So in this video, I'm going to explain what nominees are, how they work, when they can help, and the types of tax authorities who can see through weaker arrangements, if that makes sense. So let's start with the basics. A nominee director is somebody who acts on behalf of somebody else, essentially, usually the beneficial owner. Okay. Now the name goes on the public register, they sign documents, officially they are the director. Now behind the scenes, there's usually an agreement where a nominee has general power of attorney that says the nominee will act at the instructions, blah, 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 of the beneficial owner. Now the beneficial owner is making the real decisions, and then the nominee executes them and also takes the risk on board with them, typically speaking as well. Now this isn't inherently shady. You know, the nominee arrangements are very, very legitimate and they go back decades, but the word is legitimate. There's a right way and a wrong way to use them. The difference matters enormously. So why do people use nominee directors? A few reasons. Privacy is the obvious one in many jurisdictions. You know, for example, we had a client who was registering trademarks over from the Shenzhen region. He looked at the nominee and realized it wasn't worthwhile for him, but potentially that would have been a good solution for him because he didn't want to be attacked by another business. Luckily, he went for a very private company location. That location isn't doing any revenue, so it's fine for him to do so, but he wanted to register trademarks. As he noticed, one of his competitors didn't do so. Is that a little bit grey area? Potentially, but is it illegal? No, and it's not really grey area at all. He wanted to protect his privacy concerns. He didn't want to be attacked by a competitor of his for registering trademarks. He actually didn't need a nominee arrangement in the end because of the privacy of the jurisdiction which he actually chose. We came to a conclusion of this, but that's how we work with clients directly. I'm also a nominee for a fund management company. Okay, this is a hedge fund based in the Cayman Islands, and again, they needed 2 directors. It was just a sole business owner. You need 2 fund managers and 2 directors. He also owned a CFD brokerage, and there's a conflict of interest between the investors. So to get the SEMA approval, we then needed to remove him from the actual hedge fund. He could only be a fund manager. He could not be there. So it's still advised to investors. They can see in the PPM that essentially they are profiting from taking trades as well, but it's completely legal. And in that instance, he needed 2 nominees for the Cayman hedge fund. So he was the UBO, but this is said to investors in the PPM, which they will then sign, and this is completely legal. Another one is asset protection, privacy, and the third one, the big one, is substance, economic substance. I've spoke about a lot. It is very important. One that most people do get wrong with offshore companies, they sometimes need to demonstrate is managed and controlled from outside your local area. We've just dealt with a lot of clients in Dubai. I unfortunately can't be the director of some of their foreign companies because it would say with POEM, position of economic management, it is managed from Dubai, so you need to create the economic substance abroad. Maybe that's 2 Cayman Island directors, the office, a few bit XYZ, you have to build the story over there, right? And that is the substance question. So tax authorities around the world, okay, have gotten very good at looking past corporate structures to find whether the decisions are really made, okay? Now, they don't care whose name's on the register no more. They care about real economic substance. This is called mind and management in some jurisdictions, POEM in Dubai, central management and control, depending on the jurisdiction, right? So it's where the board meetings are held, who decides on the contract, strategy, major expenditures, who's signing the authorities at the bank, who actually runs the business day to day. If all of those questions is to you, sitting in London, or sitting in Toronto, it doesn't really matter if there's a nominee arrangement in a fucking BVI or not, right? Simply speaking, if the company is effectively managed from your country, then your country may tax it accordingly. There could be some magic we can do, there might not be. That's why we don't work with all clients. And again, if you did want to become a client, www.hpt.group/apply. And back to nominees. A nominee isn't just someone who signs whatever you tell them. It's a real person. I've seen awful arrangements from nominees that people have brought for like $300 from Saudi Arabia, from Argentina, and the structure failed because of them. And it's just like, who gave them this bloody advice is shocking. These nominees have to be sophisticated, usually fiduciary companies, and these companies are an expert in providing these services. We work a lot with these. It's not just simple, a random nominee, okay, from Argentina. Okay, it has to be a sophisticated nominee who has that local residence in the jurisdiction, typically speaking for economic substance reasons, of the company which you're then setting up, if that makes sense to you guys. So nominee arrangements can typically help establish, we're also nominee to get banking basically maybe. If the directors are then local and the client's living in Dubai and we're in Hong Kong, obviously we can help them get into Hong Kong banking in a corporate sense because we have a local presence in Hong Kong, right? So it's generally a very interesting term, okay? And, whether the nominees in BVI, Hong Kong, it's where the board meetings are, where the strategic decisions are being made on paper, right? It's not just having a random nominee on the document. There's a little bit more than that going on nowadays in 2026. Second is also privacy. Another reason is privacy. It's when substance is an issue, it might be privacy. In the trademark example I mentioned earlier, quite common, a nominee director isn't enough. Or maybe for example, we had a client, I think last year, he had a nominee arrangement because he was selling fat weight loss products and he didn't want to be associated with fat weight loss products in America. He invested into a business and he didn't want to be the director, simply speaking. So now let's talk when nominees backfire, okay? This is when it's just a name on the paper. They're not a real nominee, they're not communicating with you weekly, they're not having board meetings. Do not cheap out on a nominee when you're looking at corporate restructuring, Make sure you pass those tests. And again, ask us for questions. You can go ahead and book a free consultation down below and you can ask those questions to us, okay? The classic nominee that we heard about before 2015 is essentially set up a BVI company with a BVI director and you're done. HMRC's caught onto this, If you're still making every choice from home and you're emailing the nominee telling them to sign, you're running the bank account, you're negotiating the contracts, if your home and country investigates this, the evidence of how the company is managed, it is not going to pass, mate, okay? They want board minutes, evidence of decision-making, communication records, and what they find is that the nominee all he did was accept, he didn't challenge anything, he didn't do anything, he wasn't a real director, right? Then obviously, there's no substance. That is a complete, facade, well, I don't know the word, a complete nightmare, right? The consequence the company gets treated as a tax resident in your country, right? We work a lot with UAE clients who have lots of arrangements overseas, in Cayman Islands, British Virgin Islands, essentially because there's 9% tax in UAE. So very common. I've made a few videos on this. We have a lot of interest in this. Same with the UK. We deal a lot with the UK and the Isle of Man works very closely. There's a common saying that doesn't mean it's right, but saying of leave the lights on over in the Isle of Man. Very common for people to do stuff like this nowadays. And there's certain stuff you can do in the UK. Again, if you're a high net worth individual in the UK, feel free to get in contact. We work a lot with UK clients, typically actually Jewish, Israeli UK clients, seeing a huge burst of them come through. Beautiful people. And I really enjoy working with them, especially if they're from the north of England. They usually have a little bit of banter to them. They're really nice to speak to, and I'm happy to obviously jump on a meeting with most people around the world. And again, imagine in my position, I get to see all these global businesses. It's fascinating of the network I built up just from building this company. It is truly amazing. Whenever I land in a country, I've got the local contacts that I've got this there. It's really, really nice. And really inspiring. Some of these clients are really, really fascinating people, are really, really switched on, really, really focused. And obviously I do take a lot of inspiration from them as well, as I'm a young entrepreneur myself in fintech and agency consulting. So let me give you a glimpse of how tax authorities investigate these actual arrangements. First, they start at the exchange. Most jurisdictions operate under the CRS model. Common reporting standards, you've probably heard this before. Your home country may already know you have a foreign company and a foreign bank account. The idea of offshore being invisible is basically dead, to be honest. They look at control, who's signing off the authority on the bank account. It's number one, very important. Who sends the instructions, who approves payments, bank records, and the records are disclosed during investigations. So they look at communication and emails between you and the nominees are discoverable. Again, if the email show you giving instructions and the nominee says done, that's evidence of where control really lies. So you really want to be adding decisions within the directorship, so they're no longer nominees, they're generally playing a part of your business. You know, they're part of your team that then challenges you on some choices, and if there's an investigation, they can then see this, okay? So they just look at the economic reality, you know, are there minutes, do they show up, you know, in real deliberation, or just because there was an email sent, essentially, okay? And where were those meetings actually held? Is there any evidence that actually anyone ever travelled there? Now, and they look at economic reality. You know, does this company have a real presence in the jurisdiction and corporation, employees, clients, and office activity, or is it just a shell with a registered agent and a nominee? Very common, okay. Modern tax authorities are very sophisticated, especially with AI nowadays. Probably using AI in your business, I definitely use it in mine. Even to generate video ideas, generate this, generate that, generate documents, generate engagement letters. You know, it used to be legal teams, now we have that. We still work with a lot of legal advisors around the world, but now if you want to create a simple AML policy, let's say you're setting up a fintech or you're setting up a hedge fund, we can generally set up a lot of these policies, and then instead of the lawyer spending 6 hours writing it, they can spend 1 hour checking it. It really reduces costs. So we still work with legal, but we work together with legal and AI together, which is really, really nice. So, what does a good nominee arrangement look like? Okay, first, the nominee is qualified. They're a professional director, often from a corporate services firm with a track record, and they understand their duties and they're taken very seriously. They're not someone's cousin who agreed to put them on a fucking form. We see this a lot with Ukrainian clients, and I quite frankly don't want to work with them a lot of the time because of this. You know, it's always someone's brother. But KY, it's just a nightmare to work with, you know, it's just completely grey area. I don't want to be involved in any of those businesses or anything like that, if that makes sense. And I don't mean to target Ukraine, but I've just seen this so much. I'm speaking to someone who's a woman over here living in Spain, and she's now uploaded Ukrainian brother's director. It just doesn't, it's so obvious, you know. Second, there's a clear legal framework, a nominee agreement that actually defines a relationship. The scope of authority and the protections of both parties. We recently sent over 2 directorship agreements literally this morning. I didn't read them because they came from a corporate services firm, but I've been working with that corporate services firm for over 4 years now. And they're based in the Cayman Islands, and they're fantastic. A lot of this work has been transferred over to Guernsey from these British independent nations, whatever. And again, you know, this nominee is not really a nominee now, it's a true directorship. That's what I'm trying to explain. They're a real person who's really there, who's really challenging some of the economic choices, okay? They sign significant choices, they're signed into local bank account with local signing authority, XYZ contracts are executed and signed by them, board meetings are held in the proper jurisdiction, and the minutes are held there, XYZ. And again, it's all part of the story, it's not simply a name on a paper, okay? And that's the difference in prices of nominees, which you would have seen if you've ever inquired to companies like mine. But why is your nominee so expensive? Why am I spending £18,000 a year? I'm like, well, you're literally employing a full-time director, you know, that is going to have to spend months checking what's going on, making choices because he's a real director, and that's what then provides a real substance, okay? So what I'm saying is nominees are not useless. They are amazing for substance, privacy, and additional reasons. But you have to be very careful because governments can still access beneficial owner information through official channels. Okay, so if you're using a nominee arrangement to hide from tax authorities, it won't work. You know, the information simply is there; they can still get it. Using nominees for legitimate purposes, genuine management, you know, XYZ, operational privacy, and legitimate reasons, they are fantastic and most of the time needed. The same with Thailand, a foreigner can't own a company or something like this, so you need to have the local nominee arrangement. Over there, some regulations are just like this. Some countries require local directors, if that makes sense. So really, really think before you use a nominee, ask yourself 3 questions. What am I trying to achieve? Is it privacy? Is it asset protection? You know, is it this? Do I need it? What is the benefits of this? What is the cons of this? And what is my goal I am trying to achieve? Okay? Again, Does my structure require offshore management and control? If it does, a passive nominee won't cut it. You'll need general active involvement, okay? Am I prepared to let the nominee make choices? This is why we have to use proper companies that are registered CSPs. This is what we do at HPT Group. Again, if you haven't checked out our website, checked out this, checked out that, we've worked with over 70 clients around the world, set up these types of structures. If there's a way to do it, we consult, we connect, and we help you implementate those structures, okay? So we've got legal counsels all over the world, and we're happy to work with your local tax advisor as well, okay? Good nominees are not cheap, as I did mention. They can come at a cost from 4, 5, 6, 7, 20, 40, 50,000 pounds, depending on the risk, depending on the economic choices that have been made, okay? So they are very valuable. It's a very valuable tool, extremely valuable in the right circumstances. But they're not magic. They're not a substitute to proper structuring. Used wrong, they'll create more problems than they actually are trying to solve, okay? If you're not sure whether a nominee arrangement makes sense for your situation, you've got an existing structure you're worried about, come on, have a chat. HPT Group, we help people just like you, okay? And other than that, guys, I think I've shared most of my messages. Sorry, there wasn't really a fixed script as such, and I probably babbled on a little bit too long. I can see 16 minutes here, but hopefully that helps. I've shared some of my thoughts of what I've seen from clients all over the world and inquiries, and working with many legal counsels from Guernsey, Cayman Islands, Nevis, Cook Islands, Australia. We work with so many counsels around the world. You generally pick up a lot of tips and tricks, right? So other than that, guys, if you would like some help, you can apply to become a client down below. But if not, please like, please subscribe, and thank you for watching. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. Cheerio.